Lord, you're leading me with a cloud by day and then in the night.
Paul, I think it's so important that we recognize that God is the one who calls us into the ministry. As Jesus said to the disciples in John 15:16, "You have not chosen me, but I have chosen you." And I remember very clearly the morning that I really struggled with whether God was calling me or not. And I surrendered, and I said, "Lord, I'm willing to go into the ministry, but just make it very clear." And within 30 minutes, as I arrived at my high school, a young girl came running up to me and told me of the death of a young boy from our school, from our area. And when she told me that, it was like God broke my heart. And I knew as I was walking through the hallways there in the high school, I just knew in my heart God had called me into the ministry. And you've had a similar call as well.
Yeah, God gave me, blessed me with two parents who loved the Lord, and so I was raised in a gospel environment. And at an early age, I knew that God was calling me to the ministry. In fact, in 8th grade, when I was in class one day at a public school that I attended, we were going around sharing what we wanted to be when we grew up. And when it came to my turn, I knew I was supposed to say, I'm going to be in the ministry, a pastor or a missionary, but I was too ashamed to say it that day. So I lied and said, I'm going to be an engineer. And I walked out of class that day feeling so convicted because I knew I had lied and I knew I had not answered in that classroom what God's call in my life was. And I determined never to do that again, but to always share openly what God's call on my life was.
And having people pray for us has been such an important part of the ministry. I had not only godly parents, but godly grandparents, but especially my grandpa Bird. And I have his old Bible. And he put in the front of his Bible very clearly 3 things about me: that I would be saved, that God would call me into the ministry, and that God would use me in God's evangelistic field, as my grandpa would put it. And you had also parents that prayed for you.
Like you, many people have been praying for me, and I am so grateful to God for them. I have distinct memories as a young boy going down to my living room in the early morning and seeing my dad on his knees in prayer, and that just left such an impression upon me that even to this day I say that God used my dad's prayers to pray me into the ministry. So I'm so grateful to God for people like that. And I know for you, it was kind of a change in that you were thinking that God was going to call you to be a lawyer of some sorts.
I wanted to be a lawyer. I had an uncle that was a lawyer, and Perry Mason was my idol as I'd watch him on TV. And that's what I wanted to do. But Proverbs 19:21 says that there are many purposes in a man's heart, but it's the Lord who has the final say. And I knew that God was working in my life. But when I surrendered, it was the greatest joy to know that I was doing what God wanted me to do. And I've seen that call in your life. And I just want to affirm in your heart and life that I see that and recognize God's call.
And I'm so grateful to God for you being faithful to God's call on your life, not only to the ministry, but to Calvary for all of these years, and how He has blessed the ministry because of that.
And Paul, it'll be your sense of call that will keep you going when nothing else will. So I encourage you, just continually remind yourself, I'm called of God, and He'll equip you to do whatever you need to do.
I see you.